There's always something special about small, independent studios. Even if they aren't super high quality or flashy, seeing completely new and original work break onto the media scene is always refreshing. This is the case nowadays, particularly with independent animation studios like Spindlehorse and Iron Circus being two great examples, but this is especially true back in 2003. Back then, the internet was in its infancy and starting to bloom into what it is today. This is true in all fields, but it is also true with independent studios, like with the creation of Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth Studios started in 2003, 2 years prior to the creation of YouTube, on their own site with their own content. While they mainly started with gaming content, in the late 2000s they started to implement animations into their flagship series Red vs. Blue, a story-driven web series that was based on the game Halo. The story of this show wasn't connected to the Halo games plot-wise, but it was more so used for its concepts and the literal game itself as the framework for the story. It was originally supposed to be a short story, less than a dozen episodes long, but it caught on and exploded into a larger show. As the series went on, this blend of in-game capture footage and 3D animation lent Red vs. Blue a unique identity in the gaming and internet animation scene at the time. In the early 2010s, Rooster Teeth officially started to go in on animation, starting with a series of animated shorts depicting scenes and anecdotes from their gameplay videos, but they would eventually start making bigger and more varied projects. Fantasy shows, sci-fi shows, slice-of-life comedy shows. Rooster Teeth didn't have many original shows, but the ones they did have ranged from solid to even excellent. As the company grew bigger, so too did the number of eyes on Rooster Teeth, both from an audience standpoint and a market standpoint. Rooster Teeth's acquisition, merger, and ownership history is as numerous as it is confusing. That said, there are two crucial points on this timeline. The first came in 2014, when Rooster Teeth and Screw Attack were acquired and merged together under Full Screen Media, which is owned by AT&T. The second came in 2016, when AT&T bought Time Warner, which would later turn into Warner Bros. Discovery, which would be in control of Rooster Teeth. In recent years, Warner Bros. Discovery is known for treating animation very poorly. The most common mistreatment is canceling animated shows, mainly from Cartoon Network, for tax write-offs and monetary greed. On top of canceling these shows, they would also scrub them from all streaming services, meaning there is no feasible way to view these series without piracy. Earlier this year, in 2024, Warner Bros. Discovery decided to go further. Needing to make up a $10 billion deficit, their eyes turned to animation in order to scrap for a quick buck. Their eyes then turned to their smaller studios, which then turned their eyes to Rooster Teeth. They didn't just cancel one of Rooster Teeth's shows. They canceled all of them, as well as Rooster Teeth as a studio. Naturally, this news came to a shock to the Rooster Teeth staff, and the sudden and absolute nature of this move meant that there was really nothing that could be done. The only thing they could do was finish what they had already had in production. The final thing Rooster Teeth released was, fittingly, the finale to Red vs. Blue in the form of a movie, and then that was it. After 2 decades of building themselves up, Rooster Teeth was just gone. Or at least, that's what the oversimplification is. While Rooster Teeth as a studio was gone, the rights to Rooster Teeth's IP wasn't. Even if the studio was shut down, the rights to everything they made was still owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. If the rights were to be acquired elsewhere, the individual shows from Rooster Teeth could continue. And in 2 separate cases, that is exactly what happened. As early as 2009, the Halo-based Red vs. Blue started to experiment with 3D animated sections of their series. These sections, even though they are a decade and a half old, still hold up today. Eventually, these animated sections grew to such popularity that in 2013, Rooster Teeth would start their own original, completely 3D animated show. This show would then grow into Rooster Teeth's biggest, most widely recognizable original work of fiction ever. This show's name is Ruby.
Like roses fills my dreams and brings me to the place you rest.
RWBY is a techno-fantasy series starring Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang, with Ruby being the main character and leader of Team RWBY. If that sentence sounded weird, yep. The story of RWBY officially started as a pretty standard monster hunting show with school aspects thrown in the mix, but the first taste of RWBY came in the form of the introductory shorts to each of the 4 main girls. While each trailer is good in their own right, far and away the best of the bunch is the introduction to RWBY, both the character and the show. This short was shown off at a panel for the 10th season of Red vs. Blue, and it immediately took the internet by storm. The setting, the mystique, the music, the fairy tale and fable-based character designs and theming, and most of all, the animation were all on a completely different level from most internet-based animated shows. The way RWBY is animated in this short is part of the reason why it's one of the best single fight scenes in the show, and by far the show's most iconic fight scene. The choreography is especially of note, given RWBY's main weapon, a large high-damage scythe. This would already lend itself to some great and creative choreography, but this short takes it one step further by introducing RWBY's main combat design choice. As a trailer, this 3-minute long animation masterpiece hits all the right benchmarks to hook the audience and have them begging for more. This one trailer at the time of writing this has 17 million views, and going back to the trailer, it's easy to see why. Going behind the animation, the man behind the animation for this trailer was a man by the name of Monty Uum, who before RWBY was most well known for Haloid, a short pitting Master Chief from Halo against Samus Aran from Metroid. Monty to this day is credited as the most important animator and one of the most important creators as a whole in the show's history. While the animation quality of the first 2 seasons was rough and still very young for the most part, with janky lip flap, very noticeable run cycles, a lot of clipping, and so on, when it came time for a fight scene, everything would, to put it bluntly, lock the fuck in. As the show went along, the animation continued to improve, and the story started to get more fleshed out, slowly building up the stakes until Season 3 fully picked up the world-shattering stakes, with the school setting that Team RWBY was based in getting fully destroyed. However, while the animation was generally getting better, the fight scenes of Season 3, while still mostly good, were a noticeable step down from the standards that Season 1 and 2 set. This is largely because early into the animation for Season 3, Monty Uum would pass away on February 1st, 2015 from anaphylaxis. This was naturally a blow to not just the production of RWBY as a show, but a blow to the morale of the people who made RWBY. Not the artists who made RWBY, the people, not the co-workers of Monty, the friends and family of Monty Uum. Seeing not just a brilliant artist, but a close friend pass away was naturally devastating to everyone involved. While detractors of the show would morbidly and insensitively point to Monty's death as the moment the show died or started to die, contrary to that absolutely abysmal sentiment, the show would recover. The animation was overhauled, more and more talent was brought on, and by Season 6, RWBY officially hit its stride and became great again. Its most recent season, Volume 9, is widely regarded to be one of RWBY's better seasons, and Volumes 7 and 8 are widely regarded as the best RWBY seasons. While this show isn't perfect, especially in the writing department, with some underdeveloped plot points, some questionable narrative decisions in the early seasons, and even outright wasted potential with certain characters, RWBY is and has always been a very special show, both from its concepts and its wider reputation. The show's latest mainline production was Volume 9 in early 2023, with a few shorts in spring of 2024, right before Rooster Teeth's closure. However, given the popularity of this show, it had a great chance of being acquired, and thankfully, it was. On July 5th of this year, RWBY was acquired by Viz Media, the studio responsible for the production of Fullmetal Alchemist, Neon Genesis Evangelion, My Hero Academia, and more. While plans for a Volume 10 aren't fully known yet, we do know that it is currently being written. While it may be a while before we get anything, I can say that despite the numerous hiccups, the future of this show is looking optimistic. I am so thankful that this show can keep moving forward. Going back to our timeline from earlier, one of the most important points was that Rooster Teeth was merged with Full Screen Media, which also owned Screw Attack. Much like Rooster Teeth, Screw Attack was a channel composed of video game-based content, reviews, playthroughs, you name it. However, the video game content slowly started to die down in popularity, and in 2019, Screw Attack was shut down and rebranded. Screw Attack decided to rebrand itself based on the title of one of their most popular series. Among Screw Attack media, it's fairly obscure, so if you don't know it, I fully understand. They decided to rebrand themselves to Starting in 2010, Death Battle is an internet show styled after commentator sports, especially boxing and MMA. However, instead of pitting real-life fighters against each other, they would pit fictional characters against each other. Co-hosts Ben Singer, aka Wiz, and Chad James, aka Boomstick, would analyze a character's weapon, armor, and skills and pit them against each other in a... well, come on, take a guess. The show started with simple, sprite-based animated fight scenes, but occasionally they would also make a 3D fight. It was a far cry from what other web series were doing at the time, but the simplistic nature of the animation, especially the 2D sprite battles, lent a charming, almost retro fighting game-like aesthetic to the show. Naturally, as the show went on, the writing and animation of the show would get better and better. The nature of the show, making two fictional characters fight to the death, lent itself to a large audience from a variety of fandoms, even fandoms that you wouldn't expect to be in a deathmatch, like Courage the Cowardly Dog, Popeye, and even the one that we do not talk about.
They made it up. Fabrication.
Seeing these unique crossovers lent itself to a lot of intrigue and a lot of creativity. Naturally, the show is a bit controversial, but not in the way you might think. Instead of anything super glaring, like the creators being creeps, the show having a horrible production history, or the show's content being too edgy, well, okay, there is one like that, but again, we do not talk about it. Instead of all of that, the controversy mainly comes from the outcomes of the individual matchups. Given that the show prides itself on having fights based on facts and evidence instead of popularity polls, that led to Death Battle sort of becoming an arbiter of which character beats who. This reputation would be simultaneously upheld and vilified depending on who you ask, and quite frankly, whether or not their favorite character won. Outside of the actual outcomes, the simple collaborative charm of the show, bridging together different communities into one high-quality, highly passionate, and highly nerdy show, led to Death Battle growing over time. When it was acquired and folded into Rooster Teeth, while it wasn't the most popular or recognizable show in the company, it maintained its upward trajectory and quality. Death Battle, especially in recent years, has had insanely high-quality fights, pixel animation, hand-drawn animation, 3D animation that is some of the best on YouTube, to even a few live-action fights. Death Battle has continued to grow and improve. This show's last production was in December of 2023, with Goku vs. Superman 3 and the long-awaited Galactus vs. Unicron closing out one of Death Battle's best seasons to date. When Rooster Teeth was shut down in May of this year, production on Death Battle was halted and effectively cancelled. There were 4 episodes in the making, one of which being Wile E. Coyote vs. Tom the Cat, which won a community matchup poll for what would have been the next season. However, we quickly learned that in spite of the closure, Death Battle was in the process of continuing, though we didn't know how at the time. It wasn't until late July of this year that we learned that Death Battle, both as an IP and as a company, were independently owned. The owners are Ben Singer, the voice of Wiz and the original creator of Death Battle, Chad James, the voice of Boomstick, Sam Mitchell, formerly an associate producer of Death Battle, and Austin Harper, formerly an executive producer of Death Battle. For the first time in the show's history, Death Battle and the creators were fully independent. However, being fully independent comes with its own set of problems, first of which being a lack of funding. Now that they aren't owned by anyone but themselves, they have to pay for everything out of their own pocket. So to get started, on July 30th, a Kickstarter campaign was opened for the show. The original goal was to raise $75,000 in order to finish production on the 4 episodes that were in production before the closure, one of which being the aforementioned Wile E. Coyote vs. Tom the Cat fight. There were also stretch goals extending to $450,000 for more episodes, but none of the creators thought it would get that high. They set the $75K price point as their best case scenario, thinking as pragmatically as they thought they could. The campaign launched around 9 a.m. Central Time on July 30th. By 9:21 a.m. Central Time on July 30th, the $75K goal was reached. By noon, they had raised over $200,000, nearly tripling their own best-case scenario.
What the hell, guys?
Despite not every fight having a popular outcome, despite being a divisive show by its very nature, the fact that Death Battle brought so many people and so many fandoms together was now undeniable. At the time of writing this, the Kickstarter, within just a week, just passed $600,000, funding 21 episodes, one of which featuring a familiar face from earlier. The Kickstarter is set to close August 29th, with production beginning immediately thereafter. From there, with an expected launch of fall of this year, Death Battle is anticipating making about 1 episode per month for the foreseeable future. Despite ironically dying, Death Battle as a whole has never been more alive. Business is often cruel, especially in today's capitalistic hellscape. Nowadays, companies are more concerned with their own bottom line than actually creating good art. Unfortunately, this is true not just for big studios, but also for smaller studios too. That isn't to say good art isn't being made, but more so that good art is being made in spite of shareholders' profit margins, not because of them. Between layoffs affecting every industry regardless of profit, AI threatening the jobs of artists globally, and animation generally being less respected than it deserves, it's a hard time to be an artist right now. However, despite everything, RWBY and Death Battle have managed to survive this hellish environment, which given their former parent company in particular, is impressive. RWBY and Death Battle getting second chances at life is both impressive on its own, but it also opens up the potential for other, formerly cancelled projects to maybe get a second shot as well. It makes us consider the other cancelled projects that have been left by the wayside, and consider them for possible revivals. We cannot know what the future holds for the industry as a whole, but at the bare minimum, we know that there are good things to come for these 2 shows. I wait with anticipation for their futures, and I admire that they managed to survive by the skin of their teeth.